If the first thing that you picture when you hear Black Panther Party is guns, then you're missing the real story of the party. If you haven't watched Class 1 on the 10-point program, pause here and start there first. That episode explains what the Panthers believed and what they demanded. This one shows what those beliefs looked like once they collided with reality. Hello, my name is Dr. Joshua Crutchfield. I'm a historian and Black Studies scholar of Black freedom movements. And this is Sankofa House, where we look back at history in order to move forward. This series, Black Panther Party 101, is about understanding the Black Panther Party and their ongoing relevance in today's struggles for freedom. In Class 1, we broke down the 10-point program. In Class 2, we're asking a harder question. Why did armed self-defense and police patrols make sense for the Black Panther Party in 1966? To answer that, we have to focus on the conditions that they were facing. Let's start there. Historian Robin C. Spencer, in her book, The Revolution Has Come on the Black Panther Party, explains it this way. The Panthers' advocacy of self-defense was an outgrowth of their engagement with international theorists, a reflection of their ability to address local concerns, and a continuation of earlier grassroots attempts to organize against police brutality. With this framework from Spencer, we can understand the patrols as a community response, rooted in the Panthers' understanding from reading international anti-colonial thinkers such as Frantz Fanon and Che Guevara, and rooted in a history of organizing in Oakland against police brutality. By the mid-1960s, Black communities in cities like Oakland were living under constant police pressure. Stops, beatings, raids, shootings, and almost never any accountability. For the Panthers, this wasn't a system that was malfunctioning. It was a system that was working exactly as designed. So when the Panthers wrote about police brutality in the 10-point program, they were describing the daily life for Black communities in Oakland. This matters because if you miss this part, everything that follows can seem extreme or even confusing. Before we go any further, let me say this briefly. If you find this kind of historically grounded breakdown useful, make sure you subscribe to Sankofa House. This channel is about thinking seriously about the ongoing relevance of Black history, how it informs our present and shapes our future struggles. Here is the contradiction that the Panthers were living with, and one that many people are still living with today. They were told to respect the law, even when the law wasn't protecting them. They were told to be patient and wait for reform, even as people were being beaten and killed. Sound familiar? Huey Newton and Bobby Seale asked a different question. How do we protect Black communities from the state itself? Panthers didn't invent police patrols from scratch. They modeled their approach from earlier patrol groups in Oakland and on the West Coast. These were community formations that patrolled police behaviors and documented brutality. What the Panthers added and what made their intervention distinct was the gun. They turned to the law to carve out a space for Black self-defense. In 1966, California allowed civilians to carry unconcealed firearms in public. Newton studied the gun laws in detail, when weapons could be loaded and who could legally carry them, and what police could and could not do. The Panthers used that knowledge to organize police patrol. They followed patrol cars at a legal distance. They carried law books. They documented police encounters. They informed residents of their rights during stops and arrests. And yes, they carried guns, not to provoke violence, but to limit the abuse by the police. But here's something crucial that often gets missed. The patrols were also a recruiting tool. When a patrol encounter unfolded, community members would gather and watch. Police authority was suddenly being questioned publicly. And after those moments, Newton and Seale would then pass out copies of the 10-point program. They used the patrols to explain their ideas, to talk politics, and to invite people into the organization. In other words, the patrols weren't just about self-defense. They were about spreading a political vision. This is critical. The Panthers were not trying to replace the police. They were monitoring the police. treating them as a state force operating inside of Black communities. That's what made armed self-defense political. Not the weapons in and of themselves, but the challenge to unchecked state power. And that's exactly why the state reacted. Police behaviors in Black neighborhoods was now being publicly observed by organized Black people who understood the law. That flipped the power dynamic, and the state noticed. In 1967, California lawmakers moved to ban open carry. The Panthers understood immediately what this meant.
The Black Panther Party for Self-Defense calls upon the American people in general, and the Black people in particular, to take careful note of the racist California legislature, which is now considering legislation aimed at keeping the Black people disarmed and powerless. At the very same time, racist police agencies throughout the country are intensifying the terror, brutality, murder, and repression of Black people.
They marched, armed, disciplined, organized into the California state capitol in Sacramento to show and to demonstrate that the law was being rewritten because Black people were responding to their material conditions with armed self-defense. But here's the tension that the Panthers couldn't escape. While the police patrols exposed brutality, they also gave the state justification to escalate. Surveillance intensified, harassment increased. Federal law enforcement eventually stepped in. So the Panthers faced a real dilemma, a dilemma that pushed the party in a new direction, away from police patrols alone and towards building institutions that met the people's needs before the police ever entered the picture. Food, healthcare, education, what the Panthers called survival programs. That's where we're going next. Armed self-defense was never about guns. It was about Black dignity and self-determination. It was about refusing to accept state violence as normal. And it only makes sense if you start with the political demands found in the 10-point program. So if you haven't watched Class 1, go back and start there. And before you go, I want to hear from you. When I think about this history, I think about Know Your Rights trainings today. They matter, but what are their limits when the state can simply change the law like in Sacramento or violate rights anyway, like we're seeing with ICE across the country? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and thank you for studying with me.